January 1945, a telephone rings in a remote hunting lodge in the Harz Mountains of Germany. Snow blankets the pines. The air is still, brittle with cold. Inside, a wood stove crackles, casting long shadows across maps and flight logs stacked on a rough-hewn table. The man who answers is Major General Adolf Galland, until recently the youngest general in the Wehrmacht and commander of all Luftwaffe fighter forces. Now, he is under house arrest, stripped of command, forbidden to fly, and waiting, perhaps, for a firing squad. His crime? Telling Hermann Göring the truth. For months, Galland had warned that the Luftwaffe was being bled dry. American daylight bombing raids were overwhelming German defenses. Pilot losses were unsustainable. Fuel reserves were collapsing. And the Messerschmitt Me-262, the jet fighter tested as early as 1942, remained grounded, not for technical reasons, but because Adolf Hitler insisted it be used as a fast bomber, not a fighter. At a November 1944 meeting, Göring accused Galland and his pilots of cowardice. In response, Galland tore the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds, Germany's highest military honor, from his neck and threw it on the table. The room fell silent. Göring, unable to execute a national hero, instead exiled him to this lodge. Now, the voice on the line is clipped, formal. The Führer wishes to speak with you. A click. Then another voice, calm, deliberate, unmistakable. Galland, it is Adolf Hitler. I'm giving you a last chance. Form a squadron. Choose whoever you want. Take the jets. Show me what's possible. Galland's hand tightens on the receiver. He looks out the window at the gray winter sky. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the Luftwaffe he built is being annihilated. American P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts swarm over Germany like locusts. His pilots, the best in the world, are dying at a rate of 50 per day. Factories are rubble. Fuel is measured in light, not tons. And now, with the Reich collapsing, Hitler wants him to form a jet fighter unit with the Me-262. The aircraft that should have entered service in 1942, not 1945. Galland closes his eyes. He knows the truth. This will not change the outcome. It is far too late for that. But he also knows something else. He has been given a chance to prove what could have been, to show the world what Germany might have achieved if its leaders had listened to their pilots instead of their delusions. I accept, Galland says. He hangs up and begins making a list of names. Within weeks, Galland will assemble Jagdverband 44, JV-44, the most elite fighter squadron in aviation history. He calls Gerhard Barkhorn first, 301 aerial victories, second only to Erich Hartmann. Barkhorn arrives gaunt, exhausted, his face hollowed by years of combat since 1941. He has been shot down 9 times, wounded 3. He should be in a hospital. Instead, he says, I'm done flying piston engines against numbers. Let me fly a jet. Let me feel what air combat should be. Next comes Heinrich Baer, 220 victories, a pilot so aggressive he once rammed a Soviet bomber when his guns jammed. Then Walter Krupinski, 197 victories, known for his icy calm under fire. Then Johannes Steinhoff, 176 victories, his face still bandaged from burns suffered when his Me-262 crashed on takeoff. Galland also recruits Gunther Lutzow, 108 victories, a former wing commander who had publicly criticized Göring's leadership, and Franz Stigler, 28 victories, famous for sparing a crippled B-17 in 1943. A moment of humanity in a brutal war. Within 2 weeks, Galland has assembled 10 Knights Cross holders, men with over 1,500 confirmed victories between them. The average pilot in JV-44 was an ace 15 times over. They call themselves JV-44. Everyone else calls them what they are, the Squadron of Aces. They established their base at... The facilities are primitive. Barracks are repurposed hangars. The runway is pockmarked with bomb craters that must be filled with rubble before every mission. Allied fighters strafe the field daily. And the jets? Galland requests 30 Me-262s. He receives 16. Of those, only 7 are operational at any given time. The rest grounded for lack of spare parts, fuel, or trained mechanics. But when those 7 roar down the runway, turbojets screaming, exhaust shimmering in the cold air, they represent something extraordinary, the final evolution of the fighter pilot's art. Arriving at the moment, it no longer matters. The machine that could have won the war, the Messerschmitt Me-262 Swallow, was not just advanced, it was revolutionary. Designed by Willy Messerschmitt and powered by 2 Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines, it was the world's first operational jet fighter. Each engine produced 1,980 pounds of thrust, pushing the aircraft to a maximum speed of 540 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour faster than the P-51 Mustang, the best Allied piston engine fighter. But speed was only part of the advantage. Climb rate. The Me-262 reached 30,000 feet in under 7 minutes. The P-51 needed 12. Dive performance. At high altitude, it could accelerate away from escorts with contemptuous ease. American pilots would open fire and watch in disbelief as the German jet simply pulled away, their 50 caliber tracers falling harmlessly behind. Armament: 4 Mk-108 30mm autocannons in the nose. Each fired 650 rounds per minute. A single 30mm shell could blow a 2-foot hole in a B-17 fuselage. 3 or 4 hits would disintegrate a bomber. Traditional dogfighting tactics, long bursts, deflection shooting, were obsolete. The Me-262 needed 1 second of fire to kill. Galland flew the first combat mission himself in late February 1945. Climbing to 25,000 feet, he spotted a B-17 formation over Munich, escorted by P-51s. The Americans turned to intercept. Galland simply pushed the throttles forward. The Me-262 surged ahead. The Mustangs fell behind. He executed a head-on pass at 600 miles per hour, closing speed. In 2 seconds, he fired. The lead bomber's right wing folded. It spun away, breaking apart. By the time the escorts realized what happened, Galland was 3 miles away, climbing, untouchable. He landed to cheers. Barkhorn, landing behind him, grinned for the first time in months. This is what we should have had in 1942. And there lay the tragedy, the arithmetic of industrial war. For 3 months, JV-44 was the most feared unit in Europe. Allied bomber crews learned to dread the sight of contrails at 30,000 feet, silent, fast, lethal. The jets would appear, make one devastating pass, and vanish before escorts could react. In March 1945 alone, JV-44 shot down 50 Allied aircraft. Their kill-to-loss ratio was nearly 5-1. But Galland knew the numbers that truly mattered. German Me-262 production, approximately 1,400 units built during the entire war. Operational fighters, only 300 ever served in combat roles. The rest were bombers, trainers, or destroyed on the ground by Allied bombing. Allied fighter production. The U.S. alone produced over 1,000 fighters per month in 1944 K-45. Bomber output. B-17 and B-24 production exceeded 500 per month. Britain added hundreds more Lancasters and Mosquitoes. Even if every Me-262 shot down 5 Allied aircraft, a wildly optimistic assumption, it would barely dent the bomber offensive. The Americans could absorb those losses and keep coming. Worse, fuel was gone. The Me-262 consumed 3,500 liters of fuel per hour, 5 times the rate of a Bf-109. JV-44 needed 10,000 liters per sortie. By April 1945, Germany's synthetic fuel plants, targeted relentlessly by Allied bombers since mid-1944, were rubble. National aviation fuel reserves had dropped from 500,000 tons in 19 to less than 20,000 tons in early 1945, and the jet had a fatal flaw: vulnerability during takeoff and landing. The Jumo 004 engines were temperamental. They required 3 to 4 minutes to spool up to full power. During that time, the Me-262 was slower than a biplane, completely defenseless. Allied commanders quickly adapted. They stopped chasing jets in the air. Instead, they stationed P-51s near known jet bases and attacked during takeoff and landing. JV-44 lost more pilots on their own runway than in combat. An ace with 100 victories would lift off, only to be pounced on by a waiting Mustang before reaching speed. The jet would cartwheel across the field in a ball of flame. It was death by arithmetic, the 3-year delay that lost the war. In quiet moments, Galland did calculations on scrap paper. What if the Me-262 had been operational in 1942? Consider the strategic landscape. In 1942, the U.S. had not yet fully mobilized its industrial base. Fighter production was just ramping up. The RAF's bombing campaign was still limited in scale and accuracy. Germany controlled most of Western Europe and had access to critical resources. With a 2-year head start, Germany could have produced 5,000 Me-262s by 1944, enough to equip 20 full fighter wings. The impact would have been decisive. Air superiority over Europe would have been restored. Allied daylight bombing would have become unsustainable. Losses of 20 to 30% per mission, as seen in 1943, would have forced a halt. D-Day might have failed. Without air cover, the invasion fleet would have been vulnerable to Luftwaffe strikes. Instead, the Me-262 arrived in 1945, when Germany's pilot corps was decimated. Over 70% of experienced fighter pilots were dead by 1944. Fuel production had collapsed. It was a proof of concept, a demonstration of what might have been. The final mission. On April 26, 1945, Galland flew his final mission. American forces were 30 miles from Munich. The airfield was under artillery fire. He had 7 operational jets. Intelligence reported a formation of 12 B-26 Marauders approaching the city. A city already reduced to rubble. The raid would change nothing. But Galland didn't care about strategy anymore. He cared about his men, about going down fighting. He climbed into his personal Me-262, Red 13 painted on the nose. His crew chief, a teenager named Klaus, helped strap him in. "Sir, you don't have to do this. The war is over." Galland smiled. "That's exactly why I have to." The jets screamed to life. He was airborne in seconds. He found the B-26s over the Danube, executed a head-on pass, and destroyed the lead bomber. But the P-51 escorts were waiting. 4 dove on him. 1 scored hits. Both engines flamed out. It was a proof of concept, a demonstration of what might have been. The final mission. On April 26, 1945, Galland flew his final mission. American forces were 30 miles from Munich. The airfield was under artillery fire. He had 7 operational jets. Intelligence reported a formation of 12 B-26 Marauders approaching the city, a city already reduced to rubble. The raid would change nothing. But Galland didn't care about strategy anymore. He cared about his men, about going down fighting. He climbed into his personal Me-262, red 13 painted on the nose. His crew chief, a teenager named Klaus, helped strap him in. "Sir, you don't have to do this. The war is over." Galland smiled. "That's exactly why I have to." The jets screamed to life. He was airborne in seconds. He found the B-26s over the Danube, executed a head-on pass, and destroyed the lead bomber. But the P-51 escorts were waiting. 4 dove on him. 1 scored hits. Both engines flamed out. Galland glided, the 17,000-pound jet, toward a bomb crater. The landing gear collapsed. The aircraft skidded, slammed into the crater wall, and stopped. He crawled from the wreckage, knee shattered, blood on his lips, but alive. 2 weeks later, Germany surrendered. Legacy. Genius arriving too late. JV-44's final tally. 50 confirmed victories in 91 days, 27 pilots lost, most killed on takeoff or landing. 7 Me-262s destroyed, not by enemy action, but by lack of fuel and spare parts. Galland survived. He walked with a cane for the rest of his life. He lived to see jet fighters become standard worldwide. He befriended the American and British pilots he once fought. When asked about JV-44, he always gave the same answer. "We proved what was possible. We showed what German engineering could achieve. But we also proved something else. In modern war, timing is everything." The Me-262 in 1945 was a masterpiece. In 1942, it would have been a war winner. That 3-year difference decided everything. After the war, American interrogators asked what could have changed the outcome. Galland didn't cite tactics or bravery. He cited timing and production. If we had operational Me-262s in 1942, your losses would have been unsustainable. You would have negotiated. But by 1945, you were building 1,000 fighters a month to our 100. You had fuel. We didn't. You could lose 10 aircraft for every one of ours and still win. The interviewer pressed. So the Me-262 didn't matter. Galland smiled sadly. Oh, it mattered. It proved the future of air combat. But it also proved something else. Genius arriving too late is indistinguishable from failure. The Me-262's legacy endured. Every jet fighter that followed, the American F-86 Sabre, the Soviet MiG-15, the modern F-35, traces design elements back to that swept-wing German jet. But the deeper lesson of JV-44 had nothing to do with engineering. It was about the brutal arithmetic of industrial war. Germany's best engineers, Desi. The Me-262. Germany's best pilots flew it. Germany's most skilled tacticians deployed it. And none of it mattered, because Germany lacked the industrial capacity to produce it in meaningful numbers and the fuel infrastructure to keep it flying. Galland understood this better than anyone. The story of JV-44 is not one of triumph, but of tragic clarity. A reminder that in modern warfare, even the most brilliant technology cannot overcome poor timing, flawed leadership, or industrial inferiority. The Me-262 was not defeated by better aircraft or braver pilots. It was defeated by bureaucracy, ideology, and 3 lost years. If you value history that honors both skill and sober reality, if you believe the men who flew these machines deserve more than myth or melodrama, we invite you to subscribe. This channel is dedicated to preserving the real legacy of World War II, not as entertainment, but as testament. Because those who lived it understood a truth we must never forget. In war, timing isn't everything. It's the only thing.